Hey everybody, my name is Jason, also known as Pirate JC, and welcome to part 2 of our epic video series where we are going on a crazy, twisty adventure together to create this awesome dancing morph target demo with these dancing bars. Now, if you're just joining us for this series is not about the most direct path to creating that demo that you just saw. It is the opposite. We're going to take a crazy, twisty, unnecessary journey to get there. Why? Because this series is about learning some new things. It's not the most efficient and direct path. It's like a hike through the woods where we are trying to go through a beautiful adventure and see some incredible new things, some incredibly powerful tools that maybe we haven't come in contact with before. That's what this is about. Spending time in digital nature is what we're going to call it, okay? In our first video, we used Blender starting at the very beginning of this process. We used Blender to go through and create some bars, the individual bars, and we tried to combine them. And we ran into a problem. We created each of those bars. We created a shape key for its highest position and learned about shape keys. We also created 3 individual UV sets for each bar, something that we're going to use later in the video. And we ran into this problem. And this problem was that we tried to combine all of these bars into one mesh, and it had an unexpected or undesired consequence. Let's check that out again. So with everything selected here, I'm going to hit Control J. Actually, before I do, look, each one of these bars has its own unique shape key, right? Every single one. So I can click on one individual unique shape key. And when I combine them all, check out what happens. It combined all of the shape keys into one single key. That's not what we want. We want one mesh with 64 individual shape keys. So this is not what we wanted. And the reason this happened is because our shape key, our individual shape key for each bar is named Key 1. So Blender is trying to be smart. It's trying to help us out and saying, I see they're all named the same thing. Let me combine them all for you. Thank you, Blender, for your attempt, but it's actually not what we want in this case. So we have an option. The most direct, simple path of what we could do is just go through and rename each one. It might take some time, but it's simple and we could do it. But that's not what we're here to do. That's not what this video series is about. This video series is about learning new things. And the new thing that we're going to check out and learn in today's video is the amazingly powerful Blender Python scripting API. You may not have come in contact with this or used it before, but Blender has built in the ability for you to script and get access to the entire context of the Blender scene. That is absolutely mind-boggling. So incredible and so powerful, and we're going to barely scratch the surface. So let's jump in and get started, okay? We're going to select our first bar, and up at the top with all these tabs, we're going to hit the scripting tab, okay? We'll click on that. Now, the layout of what you see here, there's 3 main windows I want to draw your attention to. First one's going to look really familiar. This is the live 3D scene. Again, we want our first bar selected there. This big panel here, the big canvas, that's where we're going to actually write out our own scripts. And in this case, we're going to batch rename all of the shape keys using a Python script. Now, don't be scared. It's actually incredibly powerful and not too difficult to try and learn how to do because of this awesome little window. This one right here, this guy allows us to have live scripted access to the context of the Blender scene. So we can actually query things on the fly live without guessing what they are as we write out our script. Let me give you an example. Let's start right here. It tells you there are 2 convenience variables already set up for you. The first one is the Blender Python access to the context of the scene, and it is C. So we're going to hit C, and we're going to hit select, and then we'll hit tab. And we want access to the selected objects in the scene, okay? So we're going to say selected objects, and it's going to return back an array. In fact, if we hit enter right now, it'll say, here are all of the selected objects. In this case, there's actually just one object selected. It is plain, the very first thing, it's called plain, but we have more access to more data as well. Let's do this and let's just return the name of the object. But because it's returning an array, we have to tell it which object in that array we want access to. So in this case, I want the first object of the selected objects array. And then I want to hit tab and I have access to the name. And when I hit enter, it tells me it is named plain. Sure enough, that is the object that we have selected. This window is a live Python context to the scene. It's live. You can script live and see exactly what you want and get access to it and then start writing out your actual script that you can then save and use later if you want to. So incredibly cool. This is so powerful. Okay, so let's figure out how we get access to the name of the second shape key, the one that is key one, not our basis, not our base mesh for each individual bar, but for our key one, because we need to change the name, key one, to something different for every single shape key. And we're going to do that with just a simple loop. But first, we need to know where that data exists in the data tree. And we can figure that out through this window. So let's go like this. We're going to say we want our first object instead of name. Okay. So again, I'm taking the context of the Blender scene. I want the selected objects. I want the first one of the selected objects, that's 0. And then what I want to do is I want to say, I want data, okay? And I'm going to hit dot and then tab and look at all of this incredible data that we have access to. It's absolutely insane what you have access to. Absolutely nuts. And so what I want to do here is I want to start by accessing shape keys, okay? So I'm going to say dot shape keys. Oh, I got to click in here. Shape keys, okay? And then I want to hit tab, and I'm looking for something called key blocks. Now, I don't expect you to know this. This is something that'll take a long time for you to experiment with and figure out how to get to everything. There's also incredible resources online of how you can figure out all of the different components and what they're called in the context of the Blender scene. But we want key blocks, okay? Key blocks, and it's going to return, in our case, 2. So let's start by looking at the first one, and I want to get access to, you guessed it, I want the name. So when I hit enter here, it's going to tell me basis is the name of the first key block of the shape keys of the first selected object in the Blender scene. How cool is that? Absolutely insane. So now the one that we're after, of course, is not the basis mesh. We want that to all be the same. We want that to combine when we combine our mesh. But what we want to rename is our first actual key after the base mesh. So it is the second key block. Okay, so we can do that by hitting this, changing it to a 1, and it's going to return key 1. So that right there, we figured out what the specific property is, the name of the second key block of the shape keys of the selected object that we want. So we're going to take this exact line of code here, and we're going to start to build out an actual Python script. So let's click in here, and we'll start by saying import BPY, okay? And that is effectively allowing you to import the Blender Python API and start to use it in this script, okay? The next thing I want to do is I want to create a variable called selected objects, and I want that to be bpy.context, okay? Remember, way up here when we first started typing, it gave us this little itty bitty hint, actually it's gone now, that said that it had a convenience variable of C, and C stood for bpy.context, or the Blender Python API.context, which is the context of the live Blender scene, okay? And then we want the selected objects to be selected, and we can hit tab to complete selected objects. Okay, we want a new variable called count, and we're going to set that equal to 0. All we want to do here is have a simple iteration. So every time we loop, we want count to increase by 1, and that's what we'll name our shape key. So we'll start at 0. Our first shape key of our first selected object will be 0. Our first shape key of our last selected object will be 63, because there are 64 total bars. So let's start with our loop, okay? We're going to say for each in selected objects. Now, if you're not familiar with Python, to do a for loop, you just hit colon and then enter, and it puts you into the loop. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, I want each dot data, Okay, and then we're effectively going to use this thing right here. In fact, we can actually copy this and put it right in here, just like that. So that is the power of this awesome little window right here. So we want each .data.shape keys. I want to get the key blocks, and I'm looking for the name of the first block. Well, actually, it's technically the second block. The first number 1 in the array, which again, we start counting at 0. So that is the second block. And we know that this is going to be equal to key 1. And we want to change it. So we want to set it equal to count. However, there's a problem here. This won't work because we are effectively saying, I want something that's expecting a string, which is the name, and I want to set it equal to an int. And so it doesn't like that. So we have to do a small conversion here, which we can simply do by saying str for string. I want a string of the integer of count. So in this case, for the first one, we'll pass in an integer of 0. It'll get back a string 0. And then that's what will set the name of the key 1 key block, shape key, to be equal to. And then the only other thing that we need to do is we need to say count plus plus. Only problem here is plus plus doesn't work in Python, unfortunately, so we have to say plus equals 1. That's it. That's the entire script. So what I can do is I can hit A inside of this, have all of my selected objects, right? They're all going to return here. I'm going to loop through the selected objects, and for each one, we will change the name of the second shape key in the list for each object, and we're going to change it to a string version of this counting variable. And then after it's done that, it will increase the count. And so it's really straightforward, but super powerful. So let's hit play, this play button, and see what happens, okay? There we go. It ran. It was successful. How do I know? Well, let's go look. My first selected object, so if I look at my shape keys, the name of that key is 0. And then 1, and then 2, and so forth and so on until you get to the very end. The last selected one has a shape key name of 63. That is incredible. The Blender Python API is so powerful. You have a live view to the real scene where you can experiment and figure out what properties you're looking for, what data you're looking for, and then a big canvas to write out actual scripts. This is such an incredibly powerful tool, and I encourage you to dig into it deeper, but that's all what we're going to cover in this video. Before we finish, though, let's go back to layout now that we've renamed everything properly, and we have to do a couple of final things to clean up here before we finish, okay? We, of course, started this video with wanting to combine everything. So let's combine everything. Let's hit Control J. And now we're going to go over to our shape key window, and you'll see it has the desired result. 63 is in the wrong spot. That's pretty easy. You can use these arrows to reposition it. No problem. But how amazing is it that we have individual shape keys now, even though this mesh is combined for each of our bars? And basis, which is what we're currently looking at, is all of them combined at this point. That is so incredibly cool. It worked. The script worked. It did exactly what we wanted it to do. Okay, a couple more cleanup things that we need to do. With our single mesh selected, let's rename this to bars, okay? I'm going to rename the mesh here, the object and the mesh, to bars, both of them. Okay, now I have bars. What I want to do is I want to go into tab mode, okay? Now it's going to pop that one up because that's actually the shape key that we have selected. When you're in edit mode, it will just assume you want the that to be full influence. So we can just go hit basis to bring it back down to everything being flat. And so, okay, now what we want to do is with our vertex selection mode, okay, that's again 1 on the keyboard, we're going to grab all of the bottom vertices because even though this mesh is combined, we have an interesting problem, and that's underneath this mesh. If you look at how we combined it, this individual point where the bars come together, the corner of all 4 of those bars coming together, and I move it around, look, it's not connected. And that's a problem. We have 4 individual vertices that are overlaid on top of each other that are not connected. What we want to do is we want to merge those things. And we can do that very easily, okay? This is the reason that our basis is starting up and not completely flat. So let's go into a side view here, and then let's set the scene to wireframe. You can do that by hitting Shift Z, okay? So we're wireframe. And now let's grab all of the vertices on the bottom of this shape. And we're going to simply hit M, and it's going to ask, we want to tell it to merge. And where do we want to merge? Do we want to merge at center? Well, no, that's not desired. Do we want to merge it at the cursor? No, that's not really desired, that 3D cursor. So we want to merge by distance, okay? Basically, we want to say merge any vertices that are together within a certain range. And so let's hit this distance. You can expand this here to how big you want it. In this case, we've moved 171 vertices, and that's actually correct. So you want that number to be fairly small because remember, each of those vertices that we're trying to merge together, they all occupy the exact same physical space. So really that number can be incredibly small because you don't want to merge ones that are with the next to the lips, for example. So let's go back to these individual lips here. We don't want these to be merged in. We only want these to be merged in. And so we did that, right? And so I can click this and now I can move it and we can see that they're all individually merged. Okay, so that is how we have cleaned up the bottom extra verts that we have, the extra vertices. And so let's do another thing while we're here, which is with basis selected, I want to bring basis down to be a completely flat plane, okay? So again, we're going to go back into wireframe mode. I'm going to grab all of the vertices at the top of this. And remember, when we change, we covered this in the first video briefly, when we change the basis mesh, the base mesh, all of the shape keys will also be affected. Let me show you what I mean by this. Right now, if we look at the grid, this bar with shape key for the first shape key, this bar is going above 2. This lighter line here is representing unit 2 in our world. It's going above 2. It's going how far above? Well, it's actually going 0.25 above, units above, because that's what we set the top row to be. So if I take this, I want to use this little guy right here because I'm going to use snapping. Under the snapping menu, I'm going to change it from increment to vertex. So now I'm going to snap I can snap to a vertex that's underneath my cursor here, okay? So I'm going to grab all of these top ones. I'm going to hit G, and then I'm going to hit Z to constrain it to the Z axis, and I can move it around. But if I hold down Control, then I can actually snap it to the vertex that is behind my mouse cursor, okay? So I'm going to do that, and I have to hold down Control and then click. And now we have everything is completely flat, okay? But let's check this out. We'll go back into solid mode and go check out our first individual shape key here. Go back and look at it, It is perfectly on our 2-unit line because we changed the base mesh. All of the shape keys take influence of that. Remember, a shape key is a modification of the base mesh. Change the base mesh, the shape keys will also be affected. Okay, so now we're getting close. Only a couple final more things we need to do. I'm back into object mode here. I have a flat plane, and I want to center this in my world, okay? My pivot point's over here. It's in a goofy place. I want this to be completely centered. So what I can do is I can select this. Actually, we'll go back into edit mode, sorry, real quick. And I'm going to grab everything and I'm going to hit Shift S, cursor to selected. Okay, and it's going to put it in the very, very middle here. Then I'll go back to object mode and I'm going to say object set origin to 3D cursor. Okay, now you're not going to see a visual change here because it's going to write in some offsets. But if you notice, I'll do that one more time, the location changed when I did that. Okay, the location started here because that's the location of that origin point, right? But when I say I want object set origin to 3D cursor, keep an eye on that location data. It will change and write in the new offset there. So then if I simply go zero this out, I end up with the plane in exactly the right position of where I want it. So now I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to go to apply all transforms. I just want this to be all perfect and say, yes, this is what my mesh looks like. One final thing that we're going to do, and then we are calling it for this particular video, and our mesh, our base mesh, is done. Basically, I need to go update one final thing. We need to go back into UV editing, and we need to look at our top-down all, okay? If we take a look at that, that's the UV face we're looking at, top-down all. It copied it, as it probably should have. It copied it from each instance. So whenever it duplicated it, it duplicated the UV set. But this top-down all, we actually want it to be a view of the entire mesh, not each individual bar. So what we need to do is, with everything selected, we need to hit that top-down view here, okay? Make sure we're in top-down. We need to select everything, and one more time, we need to say View, Project from View, Bounds. And now we have the UV map, the object stretched out from a top-down view across the entire UV map. And that is where we're going to end this video. Make sure you save your work here. We're not done in Blender. We're going to spend more time in it, but the base mesh is now done. I hope you've learned something from this video. I hope you're enjoying this series where we're going on this crazy, twisty path to get to our morph target demo. This is about learning something new, and that is my genuine, sincere hope that you are learning something new in this process. The amount of things that you can do in the 3D world is unbelievably deep and so dense, but so much fun to discover. And that's what this video series is all about. Thank you so much for joining me for the second video of this series. If you haven't already had a chance to do so, please consider subscribing to this channel so that you don't miss any future updates, and we'll catch you in the next one.